Hare Krishna, welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam discussion. So before we get started, let's recite the Mangalacharan prayers and then we will get started with the discussions. So yeah, and we'll first start with the Mangalacharan prayers, which are in the beginning of the introduction to Bhagavad Gita as it is. And then we'll recite the invocation verses for Srimad Bhagavatam. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगण ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्त वृंदा। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। नमः ओं विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी निति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे। Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, you all can hear me okay, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, great, thank you. So today we have a two-part topic. I uh, wanted to use this time that we have, hour and a half, to discuss two things. One is we will continue on our discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam on the topic of the disappearance of Lord Sri Krishna. And we will also talk about the appearance of Lord Sri Krishna. So disappearance and appearance both. But when we say appearance of Lord Krishna, not Lord Krishna as he appeared 5,000 years ago, but Lord Krishna as he appeared 500 years ago as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So tomorrow is the most wonderful festival of Gaur Purnima. Gaur Purnima is the appearance day or the birthday of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is none other than Lord Krishna himself. He's an incarnation of Lord Krishna. So just like we celebrate Sri Krishna Janmashtami, we also celebrate with the same amount of enthusiasm and vigor and celebration as we do Janmashtami. We celebrate Gaur Purnima. So we will discuss a little bit about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, many people know about Lord Krishna, but not so many people know about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But knowing about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is extremely important for all of us, because all of us who are fixed in Bhakti Yoga, because the most important process of Bhakti Yoga, which is Shravanam Kirtanam, hearing and chanting of the names, pastimes, glories, instructions, qualities, forms of the Lord, have been exemplified by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So understanding that is very important, and therefore understanding who is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is also very important. So I wanted to take the time today to discuss that as well. just like we discussed a little bit brief biography of Sri Narottam Das Thakur on his appearance day a few weeks back. So we will use this time of our Srimad Bhagavatam class to touch upon some of these other topics as well. Very, very wonderful topics and very, very conducive to our progress in devotional service. So before we get started, I was thinking that first we will do Bhagavatam, and let's see, it is almost 6:08, and by the time we finish the invocation of Srimad Bhagavatam, it will be 6:10, and we have till 7:30. So I think I'd like to break it at least half and half. If not, give more time to Lord Chaitanya. So that makes it, so that's an hour and 20 minutes. Yes. So we'll do 40 minutes of Bhagavatam. So we'll go till 6:50, 6:50. Okay. So we'll do 40 minutes of Bhagavatam and then 40 minutes of, we'll see approximately. So 6:45, 6:50 we will. I'll set an alarm on my watch on my phone for 6:45. Okay. Okay, so let us start with the invocation of Srimad Bhagavatam. So let me share my screen, and you can also recite as we go along, like as usual, like we do. So these are our usual slides, topics from Srimad Bhagavatam, and we have Shukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit, then Suta Goswami and Shaunakadi Rishi, and here comes our invocation verse for Srimad Bhagavatam. So you can, if you would like, you can unmute and recite after me. So this we'll do. I will say, and then you can say after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Thank you. Now we will recite the next three verses, which are also invocation verses for Srimad Bhagavatam. If you would like, you can recite along with me. Okay. And if you would like to stay on mute, that's fine. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam
Devi Saraswati
Vyasam Nashta Prayesu Abhadreshu
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttamasamukhe Bhavati Naistiki
Krishnaya
Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha
Nandagopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha.
Namo Namaha. Okay, thank you for reciting enthusiastically. Thank you so much. So then we have the topic of disappearance of Lord Sri Krishna. Generally, it is split across all these chapters from Srimad Bhagavatam. So we completed chapter 14 and 15 from Srimad Bhagavatam. Today we will be covering mainly the contents of chapter 1 of the 11th canto. So 14 and 15 were from the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, I don't think we have any other slides for this today. These were all the slides from the Pandavas, retirement of Pandavas, and Lord Krishna ascending back to his abode. And this is Yudhishthir in the dress of a mendicant who has renounced everything, and he is going back to the spiritual world. Okay, good. So that's what we have for the slides. So now we come to Canto 11, Chapter 1. in general. So, but again, we will not be using the Srimad Bhagavatam to kind of go verse by verse, but I will just summarize or narrate the story part to make it sort of more story-like aspect, but also focus on some of the key learnings from the chapter as well. There are some very, very beautiful learnings from this chapter. So the main focus of learning from this chapter is to become detached from the material world. That is the essence of the learning, that one should not remain attached to the material world, one should become detached. So the chapter basically starts with Lord Krishna getting ready to disappear from this world. And so he is making arrangements, whatever arrangements, like when you go on a trip, or let's say when you're returning from a trip, you're already on a vacation trip. So it's more or less like Lord Krishna is on a vacation trip. You know, his original abode is in the spiritual world, and he has come on a vacation trip to this earth planet. So his vacation is finishing and he's packing his bags. So this is the process of packing his bags. And then in the last chapter, he will disappear. Last chapter of Canto 11, he will go back to the spiritual world, into his original abode. He will reach back home from his vacation. And therefore, a large part of the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is also known as Uddhav Gita, very, very celebrated portion of Srimad Bhagavatam. And in general, a very important text called Uddhav Gita. It starts, I think, from chapter 7 or 8 or 9. I'm forgetting one of those chapters. It starts and it goes all the way till chapter 29. So Uddhav Gita are the last in, and then 30 and 31 are the chapters where the disappearance of Lord Krishna is described. So Uddhav Gita is the last major, so to say, act of Lord Shri Krishna in the material world, or his pastime or his instructions. You know, act as in like his natural act, not like an acting. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying. So Lord Krishna is performing his final pastimes, and Uddhav Gita is a major part of that whole pastime. So that is occupying a large part of the 11th canto. So, who does Lord Krishna speak Uddhav Gita to? Any idea? If you know, don't say.
Udbhava.
Yeah, Uddhav, exactly. Uddhav Gita is spoken to Uddhav. Very nice. So just you know, some people may not know, so that's okay. But Uddhav ji is a great devotee of Lord Shri Krishna, and Lord Krishna once again imparts all the knowledge, very similar, not the same words as Bhagavad Gita, but very similar words to Uddhav ji, but it is more dense, dense as in not smaller in size. Actually, it's a little bit larger than Bhagavad Gita, but the instructions are more deeper. So anyhow, Lord Krishna is getting ready to, he's packing his bags. And as part of packing his bags to get ready to depart from this material world, he also wants to take away his whole Yadu dynasty with him. So that is the main purpose of this chapter, how the Yadu dynasty disappears. And that's why the chapter title is the curse upon the Yadu dynasty. So that is how this chapter is arranged. So Yadu dynasty was very powerful. So, you know, and therefore the Lord did not want the dynasty to continue on this earth planet, because they were relatives of Lord Shri Krishna. And I will describe later on the understanding of some of our acharyas, our most stalwart acharyas, like Srila Jiva Goswami, who's more stalwart than him. You can say Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami, fine, you know, but Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami were primarily just absorbed in the pastimes of Lord Shri Krishna. They couldn't kind of expand beyond that. and handed over the rest of the tasks to Jiva Goswami to disseminate, to explain to the rest of the world the deeper meanings of all the other things that Sri Rupa and Sanatan could not finish, or did not, want to finish in their lifetime, because they were just absorbed in Lord Krishna. So Jiva Goswami did all the other work, everything that was left over for, and that was a way of Rupa and Sanatan Goswami to give credit to Jiva Goswami. They left all this work for Jiva Goswami so he could, become a great acharya. So this is all very, very wonderful. And so Jiva Goswami describes very nicely the position of the Yadus. I will explain that as we get to that part. And we will also see Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaja's description as well. So, we will try to understand the position of the Yadus. So let's see. Yeah. So, okay, so we will start with the sort of the chapter. I have the chapter in front of me. I have made some notes, so we will go through those. So, Shukadev Goswami begins to describe to Parikshit Maharaj, of course, because this is Srimad Bhagavatam, and Bhagavatam is being narrated by Shukadev Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj, and he begins to describe the disappearance of the Yadu dynasty, how that appeared. And at a certain point, Parikshit Maharaj asks Shukadev Goswami, how come the Yadus were destroyed? They were so powerful. And this is a response of Shukadev Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj. So, first of all, one point in that is described by Shukadev Goswami is that Lord Krishna arranged for the destruction. So the general context, by the way, is Lord Krishna is arranging for the destruction of all the demoniac people. Someone needs to mute. Okay. Lord Krishna is arranging for the destruction of all the demoniac people. Now, Yadus are not demoniac, so that's not part of this context. But like the Kauravas, they were demoniac. Of course, there were so many other demons that Lord Krishna got rid of, like Kamsa and all his other demons that he had sent, like Putana and so many others, Aghasura and all that. And then more demons later, like Jarasandha and so on. So Lord Krishna is cleaning up the world of demons. And here in this verse, Lord Krishna mentions that Lord Krishna made Pandavas the nimitta. Nimitta means the instrument or the immediate cause for the disappearance of the Kauravas. And the Pandavas became the nimitta or the instrument. So here it's very important to see, and this is an aspect that we have discussed a few times before in various other classes, that whatever happens to anyone, there are three levels of causation. One is known as the immediate cause. So for the disappearance of the Kauravas, the immediate cause, if you just look at the moment when they disappeared, if you just look at that moment, it may look that, yes, the Mahabharat war, the Kurukshetra war that happened was the cause of that disappearance. All the Kauravas got destroyed in that battle by the Pandavas. So the Pandavas were the immediate cause. The next level, then you begin to see, okay, why did this battle happen? What was the cause of the battle? You expand your horizon of reasoning, and you find that there is the next level causation, which is called the sanctioning cause. The sanctioning cause means who sanctioned this? There is some sanctioner. And that sanctioner in material nature is usually the Lord. The Lord sanctions all activities. We can desire for activities to occur, but they are sanctioned by the Lord. Unless the Lord sanctions, the activities don't happen. So Lord Krishna was the sanctioning cause. And then you expand the horizon even more. You ask the question, why did Lord Krishna sanction it this way? and that is known as the ultimate cause. And the ultimate cause is the Kauravas themselves. They were the ones who caused all those injustices and all those troubles and miseries to fall upon the Pandavas. And because of that, they basically guaranteed their own destruction. So, this aspect is coming out clearly that the immediate cause were the Pandavas, and the sanctioning cause was Lord Krishna, and the Kauravas themselves were the ultimate cause. So, similarly, again, not similarly in terms of the demoniac nature, but similar in terms of the sanctioning cause. Lord Krishna sanctioned the disappearance of the Yadus. So the similarity is not about the demoniac nature. Don't take that as the similarity. The similarity being brought out here is who is the sanctioner. So Lord Krishna is the sanctioner of everything, fine, but here it is mentioned that Lord Krishna sanctioned the disappearance of the Yadus. So it is described that earlier the Yadus, who were part of Lord Krishna's army, helped Lord Krishna to eliminate a lot of the demoniac kings and reduced the burden of the earth in that way. Now, then Lord Krishna thinks when he's about to disappear from this world that these Yadus are so powerful that nobody would ever be able to defeat this family. And the Yadus are so surrendered to me. So they will never be able to disappear, or they will never be able to be defeated ever. And so I must somehow, how do I arrange for taking them back? And why he wants to take them back? Because they are his eternal associates. The Lord cannot remain without his eternal associates. So therefore he wants his eternal associates to go back with him. Sometimes he wants his eternal associates to stay for certain purpose, for carrying out his instructions. But for the Yadus, he wanted to be with his eternal associates. So he wanted to take them back. So then he thought that for this particular aspect of taking back the Yadus, I will arrange a fight between them. So I'll cause a civil war, so to say, because nobody else can defeat them. Only they can defeat themselves. You see? So if there is a civil war between the two, that's like, the Yadus fighting amongst the Yadus. So then they can be defeated. Now it becomes a little question comes in the mind: why couldn't the Lord arrange something less ghastly rather than a civil war? So were the Yadus, what was the position of the Yadus, or what should we consider as we are studying Vedic scriptures? What should be our understanding of the position of the Yadus? That's the question that comes up in the mind. And this question has been answered by many acharyas. So primarily I have in my study, and this I have taken mainly from the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam, which of course was not written by Srila Prabhupada himself, because as you can imagine, this is 11th canto, and Srila Prabhupada had left his body by the time 11th canto commentaries were written. Srila Prabhupada disappeared. Anybody remembers when Srila Prabhupada disappeared?
1977.
Perfect. And in the terms of chronology of Srimad Bhagavatam, when did it disappear? Which canto, which chapter? He spent his entire life translating Srimad Bhagavatam from canto 1 onwards. So he had started translating canto 1 even before he landed in America. So he had written 3 volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam before coming here. So, but he disappeared before the Srimad Bhagavatam was fully translated. Anybody remembers? Come on. I'm sure some of you remember. Gopal?
10th canto, Prabhuji.
Huh?
10th canto.
10th canto. Okay, good. The like in software, we have major version number and minor version number. So you got the major. Now the next is the chapter number. Which chapter?
I remember it's somewhere around 20 in the 20s, but I'm not. I think it's in the 20s, but I'm not 100% sure.
No, that's not right.
It's not right.
It's the 13th chapter. So he finished the 13th chapter and then he left his body. Anyway, that was just an aside. So these purports of the 11th canto, and of course, all the purports from the 14th chapter onwards of the 10th canto were written by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, whom Srila Prabhupada had sanctioned to or delegated to finish the Bhagavatam. Before he left his body, he delegated to a core set of devotees who were very scholarly to finish the work of Srimad Bhagavatam. Among them included Hridayananda Maharaj, Jayadvaita Maharaj, Gopi Pranadhan Prabhu. I'm forgetting, I'm sure, a few of them, Dravida Prabhu, and few others. So they were authorized by Srila Prabhupada to finish the commentaries on the Srimad Bhagavatam. So anyway, it's all given there. So, okay, back to our discussion on the position of the Yadu dynasty. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj writes that some Yadus actually developed this sort of indifference towards Lord Krishna. Something like, familiarity breeds contempt. So they were so close to Lord Shri Krishna that they began to have some tinge of pride within their heart. They were very, very powerful, and they developed some little level of indifference towards Lord Krishna. So now various acharyas are giving various types of understanding. It is up to us to come up with a coalesced understanding. Now, Jiva Goswami, in the same purport, again, it is quoted that Jiva Goswami says that Yadus are eternal associates of Lord Krishna. So the reasoning he gives is that after the disappearance of Lord Shri Krishna, they would not be able to tolerate the separation from Lord Krishna. And they have so much power, they have so much energy, and that they would, in their madness, they would destroy the whole world in their agitated state of mind. So due to their separation, it would lead to agitation. So they had that propensity out of their energy and vigor that was there in them. Of course, there were other pure devotees of Lord Shri Krishna who also were separated from them. For example, the gopis. Now they would not go out and destroy the world because their mood was directed in a different way, but the Yadu's mood was in a Kshatriya mood, because Lord Krishna originally is a Kshatriya, even though he was born and brought up in a Vaishnava family, in a Vaishya family, in Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda, Mother Yashoda are Vaishyas because they are protecting the cows. Goraksha, they were involved in protecting bringing up the cows. So that is a Vaishya nature. But Vasudeva and Devaki are Kshatriyas. So the Yadu dynasty is Kshatriya, and in their nature, they would end up destroying the world, and therefore the Lord thought it's better if the Yadus are not to be left on this world and somehow to be taken back with them. Jiva Goswami also writes one should never consider the Yadus to be irreligious. So one should not consider the Yadus to have any kind of flaw or any kind of irreligiosity in them. Another reason that is given is that the Lord wanted to show that even the Yadus can be destroyed. So what to speak of somebody who is not at the level of the Yadus, who are such pure devotees of the Lord and are relatives of the Lord. So therefore, one should have no pride and no tinge of material contamination in their heart. So the Lord wanted to take the Yadus away with them for that reason. Another reason that Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj gives is that the Yadus, he did not want the Yadus to be left on this on this material earth, because after the departure of Lord Krishna, some people might start worshipping the Yadus as the descendants of Lord Krishna. Okay, the father has gone, so we will start worshipping the sons or the relatives of the father that has left. It's kind of the dynasty mentality, you know, and we have seen that so much in the, you know, political circles. You know, the father and then the son gets the position, and then all that, this whole dynasty mentality. So Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj says that in Vedic culture, or in the whole Sanatana Dharma, the importance is not given on dynasty by birth. There is nothing called dynasty. There is no importance given to who is whose father and who is whose son. There is another sort of a bent or another flavor of dynasty in our Sanatana Dharma. Any guess on what that is? What do we call dynasty?
Lineage of kings after kings.
So I am talking about our Sanatana Dharma in terms of spiritual understanding.
Ikshvaku dynasty. Ikshvaku dynasty.
Okay, well, that is true. For example, Yudhishthir Maharaj coronated Parikshit Maharaj, who was in that line, but that was not because he was the grandson, but it is because he was of a proper quality, and his nature and character was up to the mark to be coronated. Had that not been the case, Yudhishthir Maharaj would never have given the keys of the kingdom to Parikshit. So anyway, I'm asking, let's say in today's terms, what do we call as spiritual dynasties? What is the word? We have used that so many times.
Guru Parampara.
Vaishnavas.
Exactly. Somebody said parampara. The
Guru
parampara.
Parampara.
Yes, Guru Parampara is the system. Absolutely correct. That's the word I was looking for. So Parampara system is the Vedic version of dynasty. And as you can see and understand, Parampara has absolutely nothing to do with who is whose child, who is born of which father or which mother. It is exclusively based on who is the best disciple, or who are all the disciples. A father can have many children. It doesn't have to be just one, and can be, you know, a whole tree under you. You can have many children and they can have children, and the whole dynasty flourishes. So that is the system that is there. So in the same way, Lord Krishna did not want people to worship the Yadus as Krishna himself. So they did not want anybody to treat this sort of by birth association of Lord Krishna. And that is very good, because he established the parampara system. Lord Krishna had his disciples. Arjuna was his disciple. So Lord Krishna wanted people to take the example of the devotees of Lord Krishna, not just his relatives. His relatives also happened to be good devotees, but the differentiating factor is to be a devotee of the Lord, not a relative of the Lord. So he wanted to establish that fact, and that's why he wanted to take away all his relatives, so that none of his relatives would remain. And one should understand that one should not give importance to birth, but one should give importance to how sincerely somebody has taken to the instructions of the Guru. That is what exemplifies someone, how truly you are following the instructions of your father, not the fact that you are just your father's son. So this point has been very strongly stressed in this part of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay. So Lord Krishna then arranges. So, one can think of how did these Brahmanas, you will see that the Brahmanas curse the Yadus. In fact, that is revealed right in the title of the chapter, the curse upon the Yadu dynasty. So how come the relatives of Lord Krishna got cursed? Who can curse the relatives of the Lord? So that question will be answered, and we will come to that. Okay, so now there is a very wonderful verse here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the 6th and 7th verse. I will just read the translation where the glories of Lord Krishna are being described. And then Parikshit Maharaj asks the question that how could the Brahmanas curse these wonderful relatives or the descendants of Lord Shri Krishna? So this, I will share my screen and show you the verse. Oh, okay. One sec. Can you see the screen?
We can't.
Yes, no?
Now, yes.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes, yes.
Now we can see it.
What do you see? Bhagavatam, the Veda base?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I have two screens, so or three screens I'm trying to see. Okay, where is the screen? Okay. 11th canto, 1st chapter, verse number 6 and 7. So, in interest of time, I will just read the translation. This is very wonderful verse glorifying Lord Shri Krishna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the reservoir of all beauty. All beautiful things emanate from him, and his personal form is so attractive that it steals the eyes away from all other objects, which then seem devoid of beauty in comparison to him. When Lord Krishna was on earth, he attracted the eyes of all people. When Krishna spoke, his words attracted the minds of all who remembered them. By seeing the footsteps of Lord Krishna, people became attracted to him, and thus they wanted to offer their bodily activities to the Lord and his followers. In this way, Krishna very easily spread his glories, which are sung throughout the material world by the most sublime and essential Vedic verses. Lord Krishna considered that simply by hearing and chanting those glories, conditioned souls born in the future would cross beyond the darkness of ignorance. Being satisfied with this arrangement, he left for his desired destination. So, this is describing that Lord Krishna's time of departure is coming close, and Lord Krishna is getting ready to disappear. And also exemplifying the fact that Lord Krishna will leave his instructions behind. So those who take the shelter of his instructions will be able to make progress similarly as those who made progress when Lord Krishna was present on this planet. So one should not feel sad or unfortunate that Lord Krishna is not present on this planet. His instructions are present and they are as good as Lord Krishna. So one should take shelter of those instructions. Okay. So then Parikshit Maharaj asks a question that how could the Brahmanas, so he knew that from the previous chapter we had heard from the first canto that the Brahmanas cursed the Yadus. And not only that, how could the Brahmanas curse the Yadus, who are relatives of Lord Krishna, but also how could the Yadus do something to the Brahmanas that made them curse them? You see, there is something that the Yadus must have done to cause the Brahmanas to do a curse, to give a curse. What did they do? Such that they were cursed that the whole dynasty shall be finished. So this question was asked by Parikshit Maharaj. And he also, exemplifies the Yadus, that all the Yadus were working for Lord Krishna. Their whole thoughts, all their consciousness was towards Krishna. They were completely Krishna conscious. So what happened in that caused the Brahmanas to curse them? Okay, so then Shukadev Goswami begins to describe this pastime. So we will quickly cover this pastime. We are approaching 6:50, so I'll speed up. So at one time, all great sages were present, and in a place called Pindarka. So great sages like Vishwamitra, Asita, Bhrigu, Angira, Kashyapa, Vasishtha, even Narad Muni, and they were present at this place, and um, the Yadus were also present nearby, and so they thought of testing the power of the sages to see whether the sages are really these wonderful elevated sages, whether they have really any powers or not. So what they did, they wanted to play a innocent trick on the sages. So what they did, they brought a boy among their community. They selected one boy. His name was Samba. And Samba, they dressed him up as a girl, as a woman, and dressed him up as if so that make him look like a pregnant woman. So they dressed this boy as a woman and like made him, made his stomach or belly, a little bit swollen to look as if he is a pregnant woman. They just wanted to play an innocent trick. So, and they made him go, and this boy Samba then fell to the feet of the sages, and the other boys asked the sages, this woman is very interested to find out whether she will have a boy or a girl as the child. So they wanted them to just say something, and they knew that the answer is neither of them, correct? Because if they say it's a boy, then also they are wrong. If they say it's a girl, then also they are wrong. But if you ask someone, for a pregnant woman, if the child is a boy, or what will be the gender of the child, you can have only two answers. So this was a special question, trick question, as you call, where neither of the obvious answers are correct. So there is a third hidden answer. So of course the sages are very powerful, and they immediately, they didn't see this as a funny act. They didn't take it as a joke. They became a little annoyed by the action, and because of that they uh, they cursed the boys. They said that we know that what you have done, this is neither a boy or a girl, and you have dressed up this boy as a woman, and you're trying to ridicule us, and this boy will now actually give birth, and this boy will give birth to a iron club, a club made of iron that will destroy your entire dynasty. So that is the curse that the sages give. And then the boys, they immediately realized their mistake, and when they removed the clothes of this boy to reveal that he's really a boy, and they wanted to, they asked for forgiveness, but the curse had been given. They saw, when they removed the clothes, they saw really there was a iron club within that clothing. Whatever else they had put in, some grass or whatever they had put in to make it look like a swollen belly, had converted into an iron club. And they were so afraid. My God, what have we done? This curse has resulted in this iron club, and this club will result in the death of our whole dynasty. So they went back home, and they told the king, who was King Ugrasena, because that is the Ugrasena was the father of Devaki, and that's the descendants of the Yadus. So Ugrasena also said, what have you all done? You are so stupid. Why did you have to do this stupid act? And then he advised the boys to grind up the club into powder. And if you want to destroy a club of iron, what would you do? So I think he came up with the best idea. I also cannot come up with any better idea. So he told them to grind the club into powder and just sprinkle all the powder in the ocean. So really get rid of it completely. So they ground up all the club. A small portion of the club they couldn't grind. It was left as a piece of iron. So they said, don't worry, just throw it all in the ocean. So they went deep into the ocean with boats and all, as far as they could go. And they just sprinkled all of that into the ocean, hoping that it will all just sink down. And how can some powder that has sunk down to the depths of the ocean kill the dynasty? So they were satisfied with that. Then what happened? A fish swallowed that little piece of iron that was left. And the rest of the powder pieces that had been put into the ocean, the waves carried them back to the shore. And those pieces of iron, that powdered iron, came back to the shore, and over time it grew into iron canes, or sticks or canes made of iron. So these would, as we will see in the later chapters, will become the weapons which the Yadus use to kill each other. These they uproot these weapons, or these iron sticks. Pretty much they are like they become like spears, and that's what they use to kill each other. And a hunter, fisherman catches that fish who had swallowed that one lump of iron that was left, and then he when he finds that lump of iron, a hunter takes it from him, and that will be the hunter who fires or who shoots an arrow by mistake, and which hits Lord Krishna. And that we will cover in the later chapters, and how Lord Krishna disappears. So that whole thing causes the disappearance of the Yadu dynasty. It is described. So that's where this chapter ends, and the pastime we will pick up again in the 30th chapter of the 11th canto. So perfect timing. It is 6:50. Great. So any questions, any discussion, any comments at this point? No?
Oh, one thing about the pastime, it's like there's a lot of like parts to it, like the fish and then the hunter and all. So I guess it's all part of Krishna's Leela, that he all designed that to sort of end in all the family members going away from the material world.
Absolutely, that is exactly correct. And in fact, I didn't explicitly say it, so let me show you. That's a very good point. I'll share my screen. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
So we go to again our favorite Veda base, then Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 1. That's what we have been discussing. And the very last verse says exactly that, the answer to your question, which is that knowing fully the significance of all these events, the Supreme Lord, though capable of reversing the curse. So this is very important. Lord Krishna was capable of reversing the curse. He did not wish to do so. Rather, in his form of time, he gladly sanctioned the events. So he wanted these events to happen. And as time, as his personification as time, through time, he sanctioned these events to occur. So basically, he is the one who permitted all this to happen. So yes, everything is possible only by Lord Krishna's permission. And if he wanted, he could have changed it, but he did not. Okay.
But Prabhuji, isn't it that he also wanted to give respect to the Gandhari's curse, what she did because of.
Absolutely. So Lord can do all these things through one single act. He can merge so many uh, plans that it is just astounding how through one act he can fulfill so many plans.
Yes.
The Lord has ways to uh, arrange many things. Uh, sometimes events happen in masses. Sometimes plane crash happens and 300 400 people die altogether. Sometimes a whole country rejoices because they win a war, or let's say in one particular country oil was discovered. One country today holds 50% of the world's oil. So suddenly, out of nowhere, the whole country became rich. Everybody became rich in that particular country, and there are no taxes. Electricity, water, everything is free. When the Lord desires, he can shower his mercy on a large group of people, or he can shower misery on a large group of people. So one can think, oh, let's talk about, oops, one can think of uh, how it is possible that, let's say, if one or two people have done bad deeds, why 300 people have to suffer because of that? It's not like that because one or two people did bad deeds, now all the others who are trapped have to suffer. They all have pending karma, and the Lord is an expert at arranging the reaction in such a way that they are all destined to suffer at the same level in that one single act. So it is all everybody is getting perfectly commensurate sinful reaction, or not sinful, even pious reactions, or sinful, whatever it is. Everybody is getting exactly as is sanctioned by the Lord, commensurate according to the law of karma. Of course, this does not apply to devotees. For devotees, the Lord personally interferes, whether to protect them or to annihilate. We have discussed this. When somebody offends devotees of the Lord himself personally comes in and takes control and annihilates the demon. Or when the devotee is in trouble, the Lord personally comes and protects. So this is not applicable to devotees or demons who are troubling the devotees, but for everybody else, the law of karma is working absolutely perfectly. There is nobody who is getting more or less. And the Lord has his expert ways of arranging that perfect remuneration. So we should never doubt the remuneration of the Lord, though when it happens to us, then it is hard to understand. Especially when bad things happen to us, then it is most hard to understand. When good things happen to us, it's very easy. Yes, I did it. That's why I got it. Rarely do we give the credit to the Lord. We always want to credit ourselves. But that also is coming through our past deeds. So Lord has perfect ways of arranging things, which are very mystical, very hard to understand. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Okay, we'll switch to the other part of our discussion. So it's 6:56. So tomorrow is the most wonderful occasion of Sri Gaura Purnima, which is the appearance day of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So I'm going to give a very introductory, a little description of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And many people know very well who is Krishna. That many people know. Of course, many people don't know, but a lot of people know who is Krishna. But among those who know who is Krishna, very few people know who is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is none other than Krishna himself. And this is not something that is coming out of somebody's declaration, or my wife can say, oh, my husband is Krishna, so you have to take my wife's word for it that I am Krishna. No, 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 it's not. You don't have to take anybody's word for it. Well, you have to take somebody's word for it, but whose word do we take to know that Krishna is Krishna? What are some examples? Whose words do we take? Who tells?
Scriptures.
Exactly. Give one example of a scripture that tells Krishna is who he is. Krishna.
Bhagavatam.
Gita.
Bhagavatam. Very good. Bhagavad Gita. Exactly.
Bhagavad Gita.
Absolutely. Those are the right answers. And the same Srimad Bhagavatam also says that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna. So there is this one very, very famous verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam that is giving us a clue, a hidden clue towards Lord Chaitanya. And why I'm saying hidden clue? Because Lord Chaitanya himself is a hidden avatar. He is known as a Channa avatar, which means a hidden avatar, because only a very few people knew that he is the Supreme Lord. Of course, not many people knew that Lord Krishna is the Lord as well. Not many people knew that. Only very few people knew, but more in general. All the Pandavas knew, and so many other people knew. And of course, the residents of Vrindavan didn't know that he is Krishna, but that is in a different rasa. But we can all say that they all knew that he is Krishna. I don't want to go into those details of rasa of the residents of the Vrindavan, of Vrajvasis. But anyway, there were more number of people that knew, but there were still many, many, many people who had no clue that this Krishna is the Supreme Lord, like all the Kauravas and their blind father, blind from physically blind and mentally blind, both. He didn't know that Krishna is Krishna. They just thought, yeah, he is some very mystical person, but we also have mystical people on our side, and our mystical people will be able to counter the mysticism of Krishna and we will win. Otherwise, they would not have dared to oppose Lord Krishna. They would not have dared to do that. So, but still fewer people knew that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Lord Krishna himself. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, even Lord Krishna went around telling everyone, I am the Supreme Lord. You have to surrender to me. If you surrender to me in love, not surrender as in like a point at the point of a gun, but basically take my shelter, listen to my instructions, obey my instructions, then you will all be eternally happy. So, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told nobody other than his most confidential, his inner circle, his close circle of devotees. He didn't tell anyone that he is the Supreme Lord. He, in fact, came in the disguise of a devotee of the Lord. And I will explain the reason for that a little later. Okay, so first let us see this wonderful verse from Srimad Bhagavatam about who is Lord Chaitanya, or the fact that Lord Chaitanya will appear and who is none other than Krishna himself. So this verse is from 11th canto, once again. Are you able to see the screen? Yes? No?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. So 11th canto, 5th chapter, and 32nd verse. So here, the various appearances of the Lord in the Kali Yuga or in various yugas are being described, and in what color and in what form did the Lord appear in the various yugas. And this verse is focusing on Lord Sri Krishna, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this verse says, Krishna Varnam Tvisha Akrishnam Sango Panga Astra Parshadam Yagyaihi Sankirtana Prayair Yajantihi Sumedhasaha. In the age of Kali, intelligent persons perform congregational chanting to worship the incarnation of Godhead, who constantly sings the names of Krishna. Although his complexion is not black, which means it's the opposite of black, we will see that. He came in a fair complexion. He is Krishna himself, and he is accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. So this verse is hinting directly at Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And there are so many other verses in other Puranas. We will just see here quickly. So this is that verse that I mentioned from the 11th canto, 5th chapter, 32nd verse. Krishna Varnam Tvisha Krishnam Sango Pangastrav Parshadam Yagyahi Sankirtana Prayer Yajantihi Sumedhasaha. Then there is this verse from the Vishnu Sahasranam Stotra in the Mahabharata. Now, Vishnu Sahasranam Stotra is mentioned or has been described in a couple of places. And this is the Mahabharata version of the Vishnu Sahasranama, which is the most widely used version of the Vishnu Sahasranama. And here it is described as Suvarna Varno Hemango Varangas Chandanam Gadi. So Suvarna Varna, he has a golden complexion. So Lord Chaitanya, and I will describe this later, he appeared as in the mood combined of Lord Krishna and Srimati Radharani, both combined. And I will explain why is that the case. And Lord Krishna had a very dark complexion, like a bluish black. And it is said he was like the color of the monsoon clouds, very dark blue, almost black. And Srimati Radharani was white, was completely fair and white. And if you mix the two colors, you get a golden color somewhere in the middle. And so that is the Suvarna Varna, golden complexion. And Hemanga, he has an appearance of molten gold, and he is very beautiful, and he is smeared, his body is smeared with sandalwood pulp. Then we get more specific. And as you will see that as some of these verses I have arranged, they become more and more specific about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is another verse from the Vishnu Sahasranama, that he accepts the renounced order of life. So he's a sannyasi. So, now one may argue that yes, more than one personalities fit this description. Now we are narrowing down those sort of the search scope. And he is fully sense controlled and equipoised, completely peaceful, and he is rigidly fixed in chanting the holy name of the Lord, and he is Shanti Parayana. He is the highest abode of devotion and peace. Then we get more specific in the Garuda Purana, where not only his qualities are described, but his place of appearance and his mother's name have been disclosed. So this is Garuda Purana, which is saying, in the first part of Kali Yuga, I will appear in my complete spiritual form in Mayapura, Navadvipa. And I will appear as the son of Sachi Mata. So here it is written, Mayapure Navadvipe Bhavishyami Sachi Suta. Suta means son. So the son of Sachi Mata. So at the beginning of Kali Yuga, so Kali Yuga lasts for almost 400,000 years, 432,000 years to be precise. Lord Krishna appeared in the first 1%, so to say, of the Kali Yuga itself, in the 4,500th approximately, first within the 5,000 years. And he appeared as the son of Sachi Mata. Then we will get more specific. And in the Garuda Purana, it is written that he has a golden complexion, and now his father's name is revealed. In the first part of Kali Yuga, the Supreme Lord in the golden complexion will become the husband of Lakshmi. And then he will become a sannyasi and reside near Lord Jagannath. So his wife's name was Lakshmi Priya. So he becomes the husband of Lakshmi. That was Lakshmi Priya was the name of his wife. And then his name is finally being revealed. The Supreme Lord who took delight in the pastimes with the gopis, who filled the residents of Vrindavan with joy day and night, who slew Kamsa, and who made friends with the Pandavas in the battle between the Kauravas, will without any doubt come again to this earth. He will be a sannyasi with the name Chaitanya, whose arm will be decorated with a bamboo stick. So his name as Chaitanya is being revealed here. And there are more instances, I'm just wondering. So here it is revealed this is from the Narsimha Purana, and I will just go to in the various yugas. In the Dwapar Yuga, he'll be protected by the cowherd men. So this is Lord Krishna himself. And then he will be appear by the name Chaitanya in the Kali Yuga. So Kali Yuge Chaitanya Nama Prabhu. So it's very, very direct references are given in the various Puranas. Then I have in the Padma Purana, and many, many more are there, Bhavishya Purana, Vayu Purana, Matsya Purana, Skanda Purana, Agni Purana. So many Puranas are there which predict the appearance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the very fact that he is Lord Krishna himself. Okay. So, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is none other than Lord Krishna himself. And he appeared, as I said, for two reasons. So when he appeared, so the two reasons, one is internal and one is external. I'll explain the significance. So let's talk about the internal one first. When Lord Krishna appeared as Krishna himself, then in that appearance, he got so much love from the gopis, unimaginable amount of love he got. Now we always say, and we know that the Lord has everything. He can do everything and he has everything except for one thing. One thing he cannot have out of his own desires. What is that?
Love for himself.
Yes, love, his love.
The devotee, yes.
From the devotee's standpoint. Yes, exactly. He is always hungry for love for himself by the devotees, which means he's always hungry for the love of devotees, love coming from the devotees. He's always, always hungry. And he got that fully through the gopis. He got that fully. But he could not understand the mind of the gopis. What is in the mind of the gopis such that they have so much love for him? That he could not understand. So he thought, let me become a devotee like the gopis. And then in that body or in that incarnation, when I come as my purest devotee, in the form of my devotee, maybe I will get an understanding of what goes into the mind of a devotee so that they love me with so much dedication and so much love. So that was the internal reason. So Lord Krishna wanted to satisfy his own desire of finding out this mystery. So that's why he appeared as his own devotee. Now, of course, he did not appear as a gopi, but he appeared as a devotee of the Lord, and Lord Chaitanya and his closest associates were no less than the gopis. They were so much surrendered and had so much love for Krishna that he could experience that love of the gopis as Lord Chaitanya. So anyway, that is the first and the internal reason of appearance. The second is the external reason, and the external reason was to freely spread bhakti. What had happened after Lord Krishna's appearance at the end of the Dwapar Yuga and at the beginning of Kali Yuga is that all the instructions that had been coming from Lord Krishna through the Vedas and through the various scriptures had become sort of captivated by the Brahman class. The Brahman class started saying that all these other people should just do what we are saying. Give me your money, or you serve us. We will do devotional service, or we will do whatever needs to be done, the Vedic rituals and all those things towards the Lord. So you will get the benefit. To some extent, that is correct. That yes, if you serve the pure devotees of the Lord, then you get the benefit. You really don't need to serve the Lord directly. If you serve the pure devotee, that itself is enough. That part is completely true. But if you corrupt that understanding, if you twist that understanding, then somebody who is corrupt can say, I am a pure devotee, you serve me, and that is good enough for you. No pure devotee will ever say that, ever. In fact, a pure devotee of the Lord will never say if somebody says, I am a pure devotee, that is a sure sign that he is not. Okay. But anyway, all the Brahmana class people started doing these kind of things. And they basically blocked a large part of society from performing devotional service. Now, devotional service or bhakti yoga, as we have read from Bhagavad Gita, which is coming from Krishna himself, is not restricted to any one class or sect or any of the people. It is meant for every single one. Lord Krishna directly says that in the Bhagavad Gita. Anybody remembers the verse where he says this?
Chaturvida bhajante mam.
Well, there he's saying that I am the creator, Chaturvidha bhajante mam guna karma vibhagashaha. That I am the one who has created these four varnas. Anyway, in 9.32 and 33, those are the two verses where Lord Krishna says that even the lowest, so to say, class of people, and lowest class, again, as governed by their qualities, guna and karma. But anyway, the Shudras, the Vaishyas, and even the higher classes, the Kshatriyas and the Brahmanas, all classes, basically every single human being, if they perform devotional service, they can get liberated from this anityam asukham lokam. That's exactly what Lord Krishna says in 9.33, anityam asukham lokam, that they can get liberated from this material world, this anityam, this temporary, and asukham, full of misery. They can get liberation from this material world. All these classes of people can get. So that means this devotional service is not limited only to one class of people. It is meant for all classes of people. But this became corrupted over time, and Lord Chaitanya wanted to come and completely destroy that understanding and give back the control of bhakti yoga into individuals' hands. So freely spread that bhakti is meant for everyone. Every single person should be able to freely perform bhakti. That was the external reason for the appearance of the Lord. There is no criteria, no rules, no big, criteria or eligibility or any such thing. And he made the process of bhakti very, very simple. Before that, the understanding of Shravanam and Kirtanam was little different. It was Shravanam and Kirtanam of the Shastras. Now the Shastras are all written in Sanskrit, sometimes very difficult, very heavy Sanskrit, and they are also a little philosophical. Most of the Shastras are not just simple, very simple. So Lord Chaitanya, he knew that the people of Kali Yuga are very dull And this is also described in Bhagavatam, how dull the people of Kali Yuga are compared to the other ages. They are very quarrelsome. All the time, what is going on in their head is, how do I get the other guy? They are always concerned about quarrels, about hypocrisy, about just material sense gratification, not about Krishna. So understanding these deep shastras and all is going to be a little difficult for these people. So let me give them a very, very simple way of Shravanam Kirtanam. Okay, very simple way of Shravanam Kirtanam, which is Hari Nam Sankirtanam. And Lord Chaitanya discovered this mantra, rediscovered this mantra, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, from the Kali Santarana Upanishad. This Upanishad was hiding. This Upanishad existed. It is one of the 108 principal Upanishads, but it was not very popular or very common. It had been sort of, hidden among the pile or the big, stack of all the Vedic Shastras. So Lord Chaitanya took the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and made it a household mantra, very heavily publicized the chanting of this mantra. So you don't have to know any deep Sanskrit, any philosophy, nothing. Just simply chant this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and your process of hearing and chanting is fulfilled. The Shravanam and Kirtanam is completely fulfilled. Now, one should realize this does not mean that he diminished the importance of the Shastras. For those who are interested, now 90% of the people are more than happy to simply hear and chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Nothing else, and that itself is enough, and really nothing else is needed. For the more inquisitive ones, they will be inquisitive. Okay, fine. Lord Chaitanya did give us this Maha Mantra and give us the process of hearing and chanting. What else did he do? So through his life, he demonstrated one of the things that Lord Chaitanya wanted to do all the time was to hear the narration of Srimad Bhagavatam. So he also very strongly held the position of Srimad Bhagavatam way up in his priority list. So to demonstrate that we are not diminishing the scriptures, especially Srimad Bhagavatam, that Srimad Bhagavatam absolutely upholds the topmost position in our devotional life. And those who can, those who are able to understand the Srimad Bhagavatam should definitely engage themselves in the study of Srimad Bhagavatam. But it is not a mandatory requirement. It is not a eligibility criteria for making progress in bhakti. Simply chanting the Maha Mantra with full heart and devotion. Anything we do, it has to be with full heart and devotion. If we just do that, then that is enough. So that was the great gift of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the Kali Yuga. And, so we can go on and on. So let's see. So in fact, the last verse, the very conclusive verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. Let me again share my screen, and please let me know if you can see the screen. Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
So we go to Srimad Bhagavatam, our favorite Srimad Bhagavatam on our favorite Veda base, and we go to the very last canto, canto number 12. Then we go to the very last chapter, 13th chapter, and we go to the very last verse. And we see the conclusion of Srimad Bhagavatam itself. What is the conclusion of Srimad Bhagavatam? Nama Sankirtanam Yasya. That is the conclusion. Nama Sankirtanam Yasya Sarva Papa Pranashanam Pranamo Dukkha Shamanas Tam Namami Harim Param. So this Nama Sankirtana is the process for destroying all our sinful reactions. And by worshipping the Lord, all these sinful reactions can be destroyed. So worshipping the Supreme Lord and Nama Sankirtanam. So that is the conclusion of the Srimad Bhagavatam itself. And Lord Chaitanya very wonderfully and very strongly demonstrated this process. So not only he instructed, but he practically demonstrated. So in, again, like we were discussing, how he can fulfill many things through one act. So he fulfilled both his internal and external reasons or his desires for appearance. He wanted to fix this situation with these corrupt brahmanas and who had kind of, monopolized the devotional service aspect. They were definitely not doing devotional service themselves. They were acting to do it, but they were preventing others from doing it as well. I mean, that's the worst part. Plus, to experience the mind of the pure devotees of the Lord. Both of those he was able to accomplish by appearing as a devotee of the Lord. As a devotee of the Lord, he could demonstrate how to worship the Lord. Because when he appeared as the Lord, it is hard to demonstrate how to worship the Lord. Only as a devotee you can demonstrate. And as a devotee, he was also able to experience the mind of a devotee. So both those reasons he was able to accomplish in that form of appearing as a devotee of the Lord. Okay. So let's see. So Lord Chaitanya, he appeared as the son of Mother Sachi and Jagannath Mishra, who were also great devotees of the Lord. And he appeared in a devotee family in Bengal, in this most holy land called Navadvip. Navadvip means 9 islands. So the Ganges River flows through Bengal, as you know, and the Ganges River becomes this great delta, and it has many tributaries and so on. Anyway, so there are 9 islands called Navadvip. So Lord Chaitanya was born in the land of Navadvip, and especially in this place called Mayapur, which is one of the small towns or villages in this place of Navadvip. And he lived on this planet for only 48 years. And he left this planet. He, in fact, merges into the deity of Lord Krishna. So there is no sort of, he didn't sort of, so he's the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord never, so to say, disappears where his body is available. So he merges into the body at the end of his pastimes. So in those short 48 years, they are roughly divided into 24 and 24, 2 halves. What happens at the end of first 24 years is that he takes sannyas. So the first 24 years, within that, he spends time as a brahmachari and then as a grihastha for a very short time. He does not have any children, but still he spends some time as a grihastha. So as a brahmachari, when he was young, he was a great scholar of all scriptures and in multiple areas of philosophy. And he was known as Nimai Pandit. Nimai, his name also was Nimai because he was born under a neem tree in Mayapur. So if you go to Mayapur, there is a very nice temple established by Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj, where the exact place of appearance of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there is still a neem tree there. I don't know whether that's the same neem tree exactly or not, but at least there's a neem tree which is said to be the neem tree under which Lord Chaitanya was born. There's also a small hut. It is said that that's where Jagannath Mishra and Sachi Mata used to live. But there's a very beautiful temple as well at the place of the appearance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And very near that, almost just 2 kilometers or 1 kilometer away from that, is the big temple that is being built, the Temple of Vedic Planetarium, by all the ISKCON devotees. So in Mayapur, so that is the place as well. So Lord Chaitanya was born there. And as I was saying, in his younger ages, he was known as Nimai Pandit. And then later on, and when Lord appears, all his associates also appear. So one of the primary associates of Lord Chaitanya is Lord Nityananda. Lord Nityananda is the incarnation of Lord Balaram. So whenever the Lord appears, his Sankarshan avatar also appears as Anantasesha, as Lakshmanji in along with Lord Ram, and Balaramji along with Lord Krishna, and as Lord Nityananda with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Lord Nityananda appears there. And then at the age of 24, Lord Chaitanya takes sannyas, primarily to demonstrate that one should make it a priority within one's life to renounce all material sense gratification and very seriously take to the practice of Krishna consciousness. Now, of course, this is not done exclusively through taking sannyas. Lord Chaitanya took sannyas, but Lord Nityananda was a grihastha throughout. And many of his closest associates were grihasthas throughout. So, sannyasa needs to be again as a matter of one's consciousness. Taking sannyas from all sense gratification doesn't mean one take external sannyas as demonstrated by all the or many of the followers of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he takes sannyas, and after taking sannyas, he travels for almost for more than 6 years. He travels to the length and breadth of the country. A big part of his so this is where he is doing the preaching mission to preach the name and the glories of the Lord all over the country. So he goes all the way to South India, all the way to the tip of South India, to Kanyakumari also he goes, and then comes back. He goes through the eastern coast and comes back through the western coast. Very close to he goes down Orissa, and then what is known as the modern day Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and comes back up through Maharashtra and so on. So very long trip he undertakes of South India. He also subsequently goes to Vrindavan, where he rediscovers some of the prominent places of the pastimes of Lord Sri Krishna. There, for example, he rediscovers the place known as Sri Radha Kund. At some other point of time, we will explain the importance of Radha Kund, but that is considered to be the most important place in all of Vraj, all of Vrajdham, including Vrindavan, Mathura, every place. If you have to call one place that is the most devotional in all of Vraj, it is Radha Kund. And Lord Chaitanya went there first in his trip to Vrindavan. That's where he went first, and he rediscovered that place. Those places had been lost, and there was just a small rice paddy field. And Lord Chaitanya, when he saw that paddy field, he knew this is Radha Kund. He knew that when he had appeared as Lord Krishna, this is where he took bath, in that kund made by Srimati Radharani. And he felt so happy then. And now also he just jumped into that rice field. You know, rice fields are filled with water. It's muddy water. It's kind of dirty. But Lord Chaitanya just jumped into it and felt so happy and said, yes, this is the happiness that I had felt when in my previous appearance as when I jumped into Radha Kund. So he rediscovered those places of many of the pastimes, and for the later pastimes, he delegated that work to Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, who rediscovered many of the other places in Vrindavan. So, like this, Lord Chaitanya traveled all around the country, spreading the Harinam Sankirtan movement and the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and the importance of the holy name of the Lord, and freeing most of the country of this understanding that by caste or by birth only Brahmanas have the monopoly on devotional service. And then he settled in Jagannath Puri, and that is where he spent the remaining years of his presence on this planet. And he basically in that time he fulfilled his internal desire of experiencing the depths of love of a pure devotee. And these are some of the most esoteric the most deep portions of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, where it is said that he would just engage in the chanting of the Mahamantra and Kirtan, and many times he would faint in the ecstasy. He would just continue to listen to the chanting of the holy name, participating in ecstatic kirtans, and then just faint. And it used to take several days for people to bring him back to consciousness. He would, in his samadhi state, he used to enjoy the loving devotion of Lord Krishna. So like this, he would go into the mood of the gopis. He would go and experience how the devotees, the purest of pure devotees of the Lord, used to feel, and also in the mood of separation. Because as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is here, but as a devotee, Lord Krishna, he's there as a devotee, but Krishna himself is not there. Of course, he is Krishna himself, but actually Lord Krishna is not present. So much of the mood of Lord Chaitanya is also in the mood of separation. And he could really experience the separation felt by the gopis. And then he could understand the mind of the gopis, what the gopis went through, and what was the level of devotion of the gopis. So all that is very, very esoteric, very deep understanding of the mood of a pure devotee. And all that is described in the various shastras. It is 7:35, so I'll end here. So if you want to read more or understand more, so then there are a couple of resources that I want to point to you and leave with that. Okay, this is I will again share my screen. Okay. Can see the screen? Yes. Okay, good.
Wash my hands and write it down.
So we go here. Many of the resources that I'm going to share are in Vedabase itself. This Vedabase is such a wonderful thing. So if you have less time, then we go to Srimad Bhagavatam and first canto and introduction. So this is the introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam written by Srila Prabhupada. And in the introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam, somebody needs to...
Sai Mama.
Okay. So in the introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam, we go down a little bit and we will see most of the introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam Srila Prabhupada has spent on describing a short sketch on the life and teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Why is this so? Because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's life and teachings are a practical demonstration of Srimad Bhagavatam. If you want to follow Srimad Bhagavatam, you can as well look at the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You will get a direct practical example or a demonstration. Anyway, so here, and this goes till the end of the Bhagavatam. So several pages actually, and it ends with the Shikshashtakam. The 8 verses, the 8 shlokas compiled by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not leave anything else in writing. He gave a lot of verbal instructions to many of his disciples, like the 6 Goswamis and many others. But in writing with his own hands, he only wrote these 8 shlokas, which are known as the Shikshashtakam. So these are, when, a person has never written down anything else and he writes something, it must be very important. And these 8 shlokas are supremely, supremely important, which capture the essence of all Vedic knowledge. Anyway, so this whole portion of the introduction, which is almost like 90% of the introduction, is a summary of the life and teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I strongly urge you to read this, a short sketch on the life and teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Okay, so this is one resource directly through the hands of Srila Prabhupada. The most detailed treatise on the sort of the official biography of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is called Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And this is composed by Sri Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, and translations and commentaries given by Srila Prabhupada. So Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, it has 3 volumes, Adi Leela, Madhya Leela and Antya Leela. And this describes in detail the life and teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, Chaitanya Charitamrita is a huge work. It's almost half the size of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is that big. Chaitanya Charitamrita is it occupies at least that much space on our shelf. So, Srila Prabhupada gave us, before he could finish Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he didn't want to take any chances that the world should get deprived from knowing the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and he did not know whether he will, death can come at any time. So Srila Prabhupada didn't want to wait to finish Chaitanya Charitamrita for people to know who is Lord Chaitanya. So very early, just after couple of years after coming to America, he wrote this book, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Very, very important book. In this book, this is just a small book, that much thick. Must be like, I don't have a copy right now on my table. I have it in the other room, but it must be around 200 pages. And this is the next level book where Srila Prabhupada has summarized the life in short, but mainly the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Very, very wonderful book. You can get the essence of all the teachings of Lord Chaitanya in this one book. So I described the introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam, then the Chaitanya Charitamrita itself, and then the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. There are 2 other biographies which are not published by BBT that are present of the biographies of Lord Chaitanya. One is known as Chaitanya Bhagavat, written by Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur, and another one called Chaitanya Mangala by Srila Lochan Das Thakur. So those are also considered to be very prominent, authoritative biographies written by these wonderful acharyas. Of course, Srila Prabhupada didn't get time to write commentaries on those, but he wrote commentary on the most prominent biography of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is Chaitanya Charitamrita. And fortunately, Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj has written a full commentary on Chaitanya Bhagavat. So Srila Prabhupada, would leave it at that. He would. So we do have the commentaries of both great acharyas, Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada, on the 2 great biographies of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So these are the resources on which we can read about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, tomorrow is Gaur Purnima. It is as great a festival as Janmashtami. We celebrate Janmashtami with great vigor and enthusiasm. With same vigor and enthusiasm, we celebrate Gaur Purnima. All the followers of Srila Prabhupada are automatically followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so we must spend the day tomorrow doing our devotional service more vigorously. And please visit your local temples. All temples will be, celebrating this. With COVID and all that going on, the celebrations might be a little suppressed, unfortunately. Otherwise, the celebrations are pretty grand. And so those of you, I know majority of you are from Portland, Oregon. So please come to the local temple here in Hillsboro. And it's open tomorrow from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. Aarti will be at 7:30. Prasadam, to-go prasadam will be available from 5:30 onwards. And otherwise, Kirtan will be going on, which is the main teaching of Lord Chaitanya. The Harinam Sankirtana will be going on from 1 o'clock onwards. So please spend tomorrow's day remembering, reading, a very nice thing to do would be to read a few chapters from Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, that book that I have shown. Or if not, at least read the introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam tomorrow. That can be done in one day. It's just 20-25 pages. You can easily read 20-25 pages in a day. So at least read that, chant a few rounds of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and that would be a good use of your day. And come and visit the temple. You can see the deities of Lord Chaitanya, or whichever temple you go to, depending on that. Most of the ISKCON temples have Lord Chaitanya. Some may have only Lord Krishna, but that doesn't make a difference. Lord Krishna, Lord Chaitanya, same person. So we will stop there. Thank you so much for your time, for your attention. And are there any quick questions or comments?
Prabhuji, I have a question. In Panchatattva Pranama, they have all the associate names of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Gadadhara is incarnation of Radha Rani,
Yes.
right? If I'm not
Yes.
wrong. So if Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is both Krishna and Radha, and there's another incarnation of Radha Rani, can you please explain that to me? I always had this doubt. I always wanted to ask you.
Sure.
So
Absolutely, absolutely. So this has been explained by various acharyas in slightly different ways. Okay. And the mysteries of the Lord are infinite. So I will just start with that first of all. So one of the explanations is that Lord Chaitanya came in the mood of Srimati Radharani. He is Lord, he is Krishna himself. First of all, he is Krishna. Lord Chaitanya is Krishna, but in the mood of Radharani, as a pure, who is the topmost devotee of Lord Krishna?
Radha Rani.
Exactly. So he came in the mood of Srimati Radharani, which is what makes him as a appear as Lord Krishna and Srimati Radharani himself, both. So because of the mood of Radharani, that quality of Radharani of being a purest devotee, that's why he's called a combination of Lord Krishna and Srimati Radharani. Okay. Now the other aspect is that the Lord has various aspects or various tattvas. Now there is not a very good word in English language for tattva. You can call it a vector, an aspect, a essence, a element, whatever you can call it, but tattva. That's why it's known as pancha tattva. Okay. So pancha tattva means one of the tattva of Gadadhar Pandit is the Shakti of Krishna, the energy of Krishna. Okay, so the energy of Krishna personified is Gadadhar Pandit. There are 5 tattvas. One is Krishna himself. Okay, one is the expansion of Krishna, which is Lord Nityananda. Now, again, we can have a whole discussion on what is the difference between Krishna and Krishna's expansion versus Krishna's energy. These are at one level just words, but at a deeper level, they have separate meanings. So Krishna himself, then Krishna's expansion is Lord Nityananda. Lord Krishna's energy is Gadadhar Pandit. Then an incarnation of Krishna, what is known as an incarnation of Krishna. Basically, the essence of an incarnation is that in that incarnation, all the wonderful qualities that can be possessed by the Supreme Lord as Krishna, that can be demonstrated fully, are not demonstrated. Okay, so those are known as the avatars, where only partial qualities are demonstrated. So they are the avatars. So they're all still Krishna himself and still fully godly. They are still Vishnu Tattva. Again, Tattva can have various domains. So when we are talking in the aspect of Pancha Tattva, there I am explaining that the avatars are still Vishnu Tattva, but not as full as Krishna. So they are known as the avatars, and that is Advaita Acharya. And the fifth
Mhm.
tattva is the devotees of the Lord, which is Shrivas Pandit.
Mhm.
So these are the 5 tattvas. Among that, the one who is the energy of Krishna is Gadadhar
Radharani.
Pandit. And
Okay.
Srimati Radharani, it has been described in the Shastras, is none other than the energy of Krishna.
Mhm.
Krishna manifested by his internal potency, his pleasure potency, his pleasure energy, and that is personified as Srimati Radharani, because Lord Krishna wants to enjoy. He is the Param Purusha. Purusha means enjoyer. So he
Mhm.
wants to enjoy with his pleasure potency. And the personification of that pleasure potency is Srimati Radharani.
Mhm.
So that potency or energy is Srimati Radharani, which is none other than Gadadhar Pandit. So Gadadhar Pandit is therefore referred to as an incarnation of Srimati Radharani. So these are the various understandings we have from our acharyas. And both are correct understandings, but then, you know, that's how much I can explain. And these are very, very complex and deep topics.
Yes,
But-
yes.
but
Yeah, I think you
today-
explained so beautifully. And I always had a question, you know, like Radharani is in both Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Gadadhar Pandit, but I think I understood now. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay, very thoughtful question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you so much. Please, again, once again, spend your day tomorrow very devotionally and do something special for Gaur Purnima. At least, chant few extra rounds with more heart, with more devotion. Visit the temple where, celebrations are going on of Gaur Purnima, and, spend some time getting more familiar with the life and teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.